A big SU football win in the Dome last night, and now it's basketball's turn. Syracuse women's hoops taking on Yale in the Dome. Welcome into our new house studios for our Cuse.com pregame show. Adam, Avin, and Riley Underwood here with you, breaking it all down between Syracuse and Yale. It's December 1st, and no better way to break in the month than with some college basketball. Syracuse and Yale, two programs, Riley, that are unfamiliar with one another. Just the third time ever that these two programs have played, but still should be an exciting one, though.
Sure should, and it should be exciting for Yale because they get to try to get back on the winning track against a Power 5 opponent on a national stage.
Yeah, December 4th, 2022, the last time these two programs have played. They played away Syracuse in that game. The last time they played here in Central New York, January 2004. They played in Manley Fieldhouse, not the Dome, and Syracuse lost that one by 16 points, hoping to be on the other end of the result this time around. But let's stick in the past because just last week, Syracuse went down to the Sunshine State of Florida to take play in the inaugural Emerald Coast Challenge against the Missouri Tigers. They kicked off in that first game. Syracuse lucky to be down in the beach bracket there, and they had their way with the Tigers earlier on in this tournament, Riley.
Yeah, they beat up on a struggling Missouri team, but they looked pretty good in that one, and then the score pretty much got switched the very next game when they took on Creighton for that championship.
Yeah, they beat Missouri 82-59, and the score flipped there against Creighton, an old Big East foe in the Blue Jays. And luckily for Syracuse, they got that game behind them. But we need to take a closer look at exactly what happened down there in the beach bracket. Let's see if we get those highlights. Syracuse struggled early on in this game. Kira Scott, the true freshman, led the Orange in points in this contest. But Riley, the story all game long wasn't that Syracuse couldn't shoot the threes, that they gave up too many threes. The Blue Jays scored 7 to start off the game and took a 29-9 lead after the first quarter.
And this is a pattern we've been seeing with Syracuse women's basketball this season so far. They let up these early leads, and then the margins are just too big that they're not able to come back from.
Right, it's something that's been happening all season long. Syracuse has been scoring the basketball late in the games, but giving up those leads early and not scoring to keep up with them. And you see it, Blue Jay after Blue Jay, shot after shot, dropping from beyond the arc. It was Morgan Molly there, continuously back-to-back threes to kick off the second half. Isabella Varejao trying to do it all for the Orange, but unfortunately it might have been a little too late.
Yeah, Morgan Molly was hot in this game. 28 points, 100%, 6 for 6 mark from 3 and 11 for 14 total. The Orange just couldn't stop her on defense.
They couldn't stop anybody on defense. They shot 50% from 3, the Blue Jays did. Syracuse didn't shoot from 3 as well as Creighton did. Dominique Campo trying to get Syracuse back in the game. Olivia Schmidt, the true freshman, getting to the starting lineup for the first time in the Emerald Coast Challenge, trying to help Syracuse late in the game, but ultimately they couldn't pull through. 86-59, Syracuse drops this one to Creighton. What stands out about the results in this game, Riley?
I think you got to go with that 3-point field goal percentage from Creighton. Syracuse just couldn't defend that 3 ball. They tried a few different looks on defense. They started in a man, switched to some zone. They switched to a zone because they really couldn't keep up with the Creighton motion offense that's just running around creating havoc. And then that zone just creates open looks from 3, and that's where the Blue Jays killed them.
Well, Syracuse drops that one to Creighton, and you can attribute that loss to many things. But when you look at the season as a whole, now 4 losses early on in the season, you expected some of those stars to maybe step up into more of that veteran role and score the basketball a little bit more efficiently. Georgia Woolley and Kyra Wood combined for just 14 points in that loss to Creighton, and you were expecting those to be the 2 main scorers for the Syracuse team coming into the season. So, Riley, when you look at these 2 players in Kyra Wood and Georgia Woolley, what can they do going forward to make sure that they're scoring the ball more and helping the Syracuse team win?
I think they got to stay the path. I think for Kyra Wood, I'd like to see her crash the boards a little more. But Georgia Woolley, I mean, she's been shooting the ball lights out. Compared to last season, just shot 29% from 3. This year, she's shooting 44%. Her free throw numbers have also gone up. You can tell that off-season work has really been paying off for Georgia Woolley. She's a pure star for the Syracuse team.
Yeah, Kyra Wood had a lesser role last year, but has been playing really big for Syracuse this season. Just 6 points, though, in that Creighton loss. You need your stars to step up. Kyra Wood been big on the boards and on defense, though.
Yeah, you'd like to see her shoot really efficiently, and the team does well. They're 3-0 when she shoots over 50%. The Orange 0-4 when she shoots at or below 50%. So if she shoots above that half mark, they end up doing pretty good.
Kyra Wood playing big down low for the Orange. That's those 7 rebounds, huge going forward. Syracuse actually does really well in those second chance points categories, partly due to the fact that she's always there crashing the boards. But you got to be able to make those shots to stay in those games.
Yeah, you do. And Kyra Wood, the free throw shooting. I mean, that's big for this Syracuse team. And when you come down to those close games, when we get into ACC play, that's really going to be a stat that we look for going there.
Yeah, despite the struggles early on from the veterans on this team, there have been a lot of bright spots in the young stars, starting with Kira Scott and Sophie Burrows, who was with the team last year. Kira Scott, a true freshman power forward, and they've been playing lights out for the Orange to start off this season.
Kira Scott was the lone double-figure scorer in that Creighton loss, 11 points. No one else had more than 9, so she's been turning it up a notch. I'd like to see her crash the boards a little more. She had 8 rebounds in her first game versus Niagara, a combined 5 boards in her next 6.
And Sophie Burrows shooting 50% from the floor, but 52% from 3. And she's leading the team in 3-point attempts, Riley. For the amount of shots that she's taking, the volume is there, and the production is there too. She's knocking all of them down.
Yeah, I mean, and she's another player, Georgia Woolley also, that's just bumped up her 3-point shooting numbers around 27% last year, now over 50%. I'd also like to see Sophie Burrows pass the ball, facilitate a little more. They let her do that in the Missouri game a little bit, and then she had 7 assists, 0 turnovers. She hadn't had another game in her career with more than 3.
Well, the sophomore and the freshman getting the ball in their hands quite a bit to start off this season, and Coach Jack has really loved the aggressiveness that she's seen from the young players so early on.
That's our future, and we've got some more pieces that's coming, and I think that it was set up that way for us to see what tomorrow's going to look like. When those big, most of them are big seniors leave. So I like their energy. Those kids have been staying with us the whole time.
Coach Jack trying a lot of different rotations this season, a lot of different players touching the floor for the Orange. Kira Scott and Sophie Burrows definitely doing their part on the offensive side. But for the team as a whole, Riley, the defense is still a step behind. What can they do to make sure that they're stopping the opponents from scoring as many shots as they're taking? Because those 3 balls, like we saw against Creighton, every shot is falling.
Well, I'll use your words against you. They can stop being a literal step behind. You see it a lot of times. They're not a very well-conditioned team, and that's not really a problem you can address in season. So they try to rotate their players a lot. At times they move to a zone because they can't keep up with the constant running that man defense requires, but that does turn into leaving the 3 open. At Syracuse, their defense always seems to be a step behind on cuts, especially early on in the season, like in this Fairleigh Dickinson game. When you watch them in the paint, all those backdoor cuts just beat them.
Definitely, the 3 balls were falling against FDU, but everything has been falling for the Syracuse defense. You'd hate to see these statistics that we got to point out here, but the worst scoring defense, defensive rebounds, field goal defense, 3-point field goal defense, all worst in the ACC. And with ACC competition coming up, Riley, Syracuse really needs to tighten this up if they want to stay in those conference games.
Someone always seems to be open. When you look at Syracuse offensively, they're shooting the ball really well, 41% from 3. But you know what? They're also allowing their opponents to shoot the exact same mark, 41% from 3. So they're kind of evening each other out.
Yeah, Syracuse's opponents almost shooting 500 from beyond the mark. And Syracuse, their record looking to get back to 500 today as they take on Yale in the Dome. Should be an exciting one. When we come back, we're going to be breaking down the Yale Bulldogs. Stay with us on the Cuse.com pregame show. Chilly day outside, but nothing better than basketball in the Dome. Syracuse women's hoops facing off against Yale. Welcome back into our Cuse.com pregame show. Adam Avin, Riley Underwood talking Syracuse and Yale women's basketball. And Riley, let's really get into the Yale Bulldogs right now. They have been struggling so far this year, to put it lightly, just 1-7 so far. And in conference play, with that not even starting yet, you'd hope that they step up a little bit early on.
I'm sure they hope to step it up too. They've lost 7 straight. Their only win was their very first game at home against Monmouth, and that was November 4th. So nearly a month since that last Bulldog win.
Pretty similar to Syracuse, if you were with us earlier in the show. Worst scoring defense in the Ivy League. Field goal percentage down for the Bulldogs team as well. And that was apparent in their early games so far this season, that the shooting hasn't been there and they've been giving up a lot of points, just like in their last one against Bryant. Let's take a closer look at those highlights so we can see how Syracuse's opponent plays some basketball. And Riley, this was a rare Bulldogs versus Bulldogs matchup between Yale and Bryant, an exciting one that was actually close for a lot of the game.
Yeah, it was. And Yale has honestly started off games pretty well, and then the opponents just seemed to pull ahead. Bryant was up only 4 points at halftime, and then they pulled away. They outscored Yale 23-15 in the third quarter.
Yeah, Breezy Williams for the Bulldogs trying to help her team out, take the layup there, and the Bulldogs weren't going away without a fight. This one was back and forth early, dive into the paint, crashing the boards, but unfortunately they couldn't stop the post play of Bryant.
No, they couldn't. Breezy Williams, how about a name that is? 23 points on 50% shooting. Mackenzie Egger, as always, she had a good game, 21-7 from her.
21-7 from one player, though, isn't going to be enough to beat a Bryant Bulldogs team that stormed back in the third quarter, like you mentioned, outscored Yale by 8 points in that third frame. And Mackenzie Eggers, though, trying to keep her team in it late, but it was too little, too late for the Bulldogs of Yale, I should say.
Yeah, Bryant, pretty good team, 7-1. They come away with the 15-point victory. Yale drops to 1-7.
Yale didn't shoot the ball well. Bryant shot the ball worse. 8% from three. Didn't really have it in that game, but like we mentioned in most of those highlights, Bryant players attacking the boards, driving past those Yale players and just making those easy layups. And if you're Syracuse today, don't you think you kind of have to attack the paint now that you saw what they did against Bryant?
I think you have to, because Bryant just played a little more physical. Neither team could put the ball in the hoop, but when you got it in the paint, that was when their success came. So for Syracuse, you got to look at that film. You got to pound the paint at them.
Right. Well, there's one player for Yale that has been a bright spot all season long, Mackenzie Eggers, who's been the best player for the Bulldogs so far this season. And for the past couple of seasons, can score the basketball really well, Riley, but Syracuse is going to have to focus on her early on in this game.
Yeah, I mean, she averages a double-double. Nothing to laugh about if you're Syracuse. This is a player who can just purely score the ball. I mean, she's really improved her game from last year. She didn't even average 4 points. Now she's averaging 17 and 10 and shooting 47% from three. She didn't make a three last year.
47% from three after not making a three last year is definitely a big jump, but that's what you have to do. You got to take that step up, and you got to score the basketball when the rest of your team is down, and that's exactly what Mackenzie Eggers does. And there she is warming up in the JMA Wireless Dome. Syracuse looks to stop her today, shoots the ball really well from three, and if we know that Syracuse defense that we've been talking about so far, they're going to have to worry about her early on in this game so they don't get blown out like they did against Creighton from beyond the arc.
3 straight 20-point games from Mackenzie Egger. Those have all come on the losing side of things. I mean, but you just got to admire the way she plays. She really pounds the board, too. She had 18 and 20 rebounds in the loss against Merrimack. She's been a bright spot for this Yale Bulldog squad.
All right, so Kyra Wood might be big on the boards there for Syracuse. These two teams going at it, though. Yale down in the Ivy League standings. Let's take an Ivy League look around at how the conference is shaping up for the Bulldogs. Conference play has not started yet. Yale, unfortunately, at the bottom. Harvard at the top at 9-1, first in the conference. And a Dartmouth team right in the middle, Riley, that Syracuse plays later this month.
Yeah, they haven't even really played, only 4 games played so far for Dartmouth. Harvard looks really good. They beat 2 Power 5 teams already, and they beat Indiana, who was a then top 25 team. And I'm looking at Princeton, the #1 team last year. Their 5 wins are against Power 5 schools, and their 2 losses are from mid-majors.
Yeah, a lot of confusion right now in the Ivy League standings. No teams, they haven't beaten each other yet, but conference play will start very soon. But this is an exciting time in college basketball. Let's take a look around the nation at some of the other games happening around the country right now. With the Ivy League, outside of the Ivy League, in the ACC, Syracuse competition. And you see at the top, your top left, Columbia and Duke Columbia, second in the Ivy League right now, playing against the Duke team that took down Maryland. Syracuse plays Duke later this year. Duke beat Maryland, who Syracuse lost to as well. So that might be an interesting one. Tip-off at noon as well.
I have my eyes on this game down in Coral Gables as well. Miami, a team that Syracuse just beat up on the football field yesterday, stormed the field. But they're playing a really tough Quinnipiac team that are coming out of the Metro Atlantic. Both of those teams enter this game 6-0. I don't think this is a team to scoff at if you're the Hurricanes.
You see Clemson, you see Georgia Tech, and Dartmouth, who Syracuse plays later this year as well. A lot of exciting games happening around the NCAA. We'll be right back on the Cuse.com pregame show with our very own Ailey Weiss breaking down this matchup between Syracuse and Yale. Stay with us. Syracuse women's basketball taking on Yale. The Dome getting ready and still shaken after last night's big football win. Welcome back into our new house studios for the Cuse.com pregame show. Adam, Avin, and Riley Underwood here with you. The game getting ready in the Dome, and that's exactly where we're going to head right now as our very own Ailey Weiss, our sideline reporter for today's broadcast in the Dome. Ailey, thanks so much for joining us. Syracuse and Yale. This is another non-conference opponent for Syracuse. How important is this game for the Orange to get early in the season?
It's extremely important, especially because the last time they played in the Dome, there was a lot of frustration and even some tears in that post-game press conference. So they're in here tonight trying to prove not only to themselves, but to the fans why everyone should be here supporting this team.
We've seen a lot of increase in the younger members of this squad having a big role. What role should we see them playing and expect them to play moving forward?
I have my eyes on Olivia Schmidt. She earned herself a starting spot against this past weekend against Missouri. They ended up coming out with the win after that game. So she's been doing a really good job. Coach Legette told me before the game today that she's been proving herself in practice, being very gritty and showing her that she wants those minutes on the court.
So coming off a loss against Creighton down in Florida, what does a successful day look like against a 1-7 Yale team for Syracuse?
Obviously, they want to get the win. What team doesn't? But they have to come out and assert dominance. That's something that they've been struggling with, along with a team identity. Coach Legette was telling me when they were down in Florida for the tournament, they were doing some team bonding. They even had a beach workout. So they're doing any and everything they can to do off of the court, which will hopefully replicate that on the court.
Ailey, onto the Yale side of things. Mackenzie Eggers, the star for the Yale Bulldogs squad, the only double-digit scorer on their team. What do the other supporting pieces for the Bulldogs have to do if they want to try and compete with the Orange today?
I'm going to look to Avery Lee, the point guard, who's also a senior, so she has some experience as well working with Eggers, and do some pick and rolls, maybe a pick and pop. Eggers has proven to us that she can shoot that three ball really well. So just taking some of that pressure and that spotlight off of Eggers and creating some more opportunities for not only herself, but maybe some of those other players getting someone else open as well.
Ailey, thanks so much for the time. Ailey will be back on the full broadcast later on, but we have a little bit more to talk about on the Cuse.com pregame show. Syracuse and Yale. Stick around. We'll be right back. Syracuse and Yale in the Dome coming up in just a few minutes as we finish up here on the Cuse.com pregame show. Adam, Avin, and Riley Underwood here with you in the final minutes before Syracuse and Yale compete in the Dome. Coach Jack has loved what her team has done this year despite the early season struggles and says that there is still a lot of basketball left to play.
You can be better than us, but you're never going to see us quit. You're never going to see us surrender until the last horn sound, and that's the start of our foundation of our team. And we certainly gave up way too many points and took too many threes, but man, I like this team. I like what we stand for, and I like what the fight that we're having and the resilience that we're showing.
Coach Jack, although she acknowledges the struggles her team has had, really impressed with some of the young players on the team and the fight that they've had despite the losses.
Yeah, her press conferences recently have been pretty interesting to say the least, but the effort is one thing that's going to really be important for the squad moving forward because it's really easy to get down on yourself. You're below 500 before Atlantic Coast Conference play even starts, but if you got to be persistent. She likes her guys. She likes who she has on the floor. That persistence is key, especially when you're going to try to get back on the right track.
Yeah, the returners, the new faces on the team, trying to build up that team chemistry before ACC play starts. Speaking of which, let's take a look at that upcoming schedule for the Orange. ACC play a little bit down the roads, kicking off next week. Yale today, and then they got another big non-conference one, Texas A&M, later this week.
I think going into ACC play, that Notre Dame game kind of in the middle of it all, that's going to be a tough one and a pretty big test for Syracuse.
Yeah, quite a big game that Notre Dame won there. Then back, Binghamton, Dartmouth, to end off that stretch. And then the real test starts when you come into the month of January. All those big ACC games, those rivals that Syracuse has played over the past couple of seasons with FLJ at the helm, should be an exciting one. But we have an exciting one today in the Dome, Riley. Syracuse and Yale looking back to get back in the win column for both of these teams after a couple of recent losses. But for Syracuse, who's a player that you're looking at today that you're looking to step up for the Orange?
I'm looking at Olivia Schmidt. I think Syracuse fans should be really excited when they watch her play. Schmidt started both games down in Florida. Those were her first 2 starts of the season. Didn't really get many minutes before that. She received a lot of praise in the Albany post-game press conference from Coach Jack for her hustle. She had a game, 7 assists. She plays with a spark. She plays hard, and she took Dom Camp's starting spot down in Florida when she was benched against Missouri.
Dom Camp, a tremendous scorer, but Olivia Schmidt maybe kind of brings that more facilitator role to that starting lineup, a player who can dish it, who can score when she needs to, but still important, these young faces on the team now getting the opportunity to shine early on in the season. And Schmidt now in the starting lineup. We'll see if she continues that play today after a good run in Florida. But looking at the Yale Bulldogs now, Riley, who's a player you're watching for them?
I'm looking at Kylie Capstraw. Obviously, we can go with Mackenzie Eggers. We know she's going to play well, but we need another player if you're this Yale squad to step up. And Capstraw, she has a chip on their shoulder. She was their leading returning scorer, and all of her numbers have gone down significantly from last year. Today could be a chance for her to return to old form and break out for the Bulldogs.
30% shooting was their leading scorer last season, and you're right. If Syracuse can attack the main player on the team and kind of stop the main scorer, then maybe the other players around them will have some success. As for Syracuse, though, Coach Jack has had a lot of new players on the team. She's trying out a lot of different rotations. Are you expecting, outside of Olivia Schmidt, or any specific players to step up today? Maybe specifically shooting the basketball, because we know scoring has been an issue for this.
Well, I think we're going to see a lot of different players. We're kind of seeing these minutes from the starters decrease, these minutes from the bench increase, because again, that conditioning has been an issue. Players not in the best shape, so that means you got to rotate those players in. That means a lot of players are going to see the floor today against Yale, and I think we're going to see a lot of new faces get a chance to shine.
Well, it's important that you try out these different lineup changes before you get into conference play, and Syracuse definitely has a lot of fun tests coming up. That's all on the Cuse.com pregame show. For Adam Avin and Riley Underwood, everyone behind the scenes, thanks so much. Hudson Ridley and Adam Gawkin got you in the Dome. Have a good time.